That dot is the Milky Way. Now guess where the nearest neighbor galaxy is. Not yet. That's Andromeda, 2.5 million light-years away, the closest large galaxy to our own. At the speed of Voyager 1, the fastest object humanity has ever launched, reaching Andromeda would take 44 billion years, 3 times the current age of the universe. And Andromeda is close. On a cosmic scale, Andromeda is functionally touching us, because most of what exists between galaxies is not thin gas or scattered stars. Most of what exists between galaxies is nothing. Not nearly nothing, not very sparse, nothing. Regions of space, hundreds of millions of light-years across, containing no stars, no dust, no measurable radiation, essentially perfect vacuum. Astronomers call them cosmic voids, and once you understand what they are, you cannot look at the night sky the same way. I want to tell you about one, the Boötes void, discovered in 1981 by a Harvard astronomer named Robert Kirshner, 330 million light-years across. Inside that volume, there should be, statistically, about 10,000 galaxies. There are around 60. The rest is empty. If humanity's descendants ever leave the Milky Way, there is a real chance they will spend the entire journey, millions of years, thousands of generations, inside a region like this. And I want to walk through what that would actually mean. Not the physics, the experience, because it would be, without exaggeration, the loneliest thing any living creature has ever done. Let's go inside. In 1937, at the Palomar Observatory, a Swiss-American astronomer named Fritz Zwicky was measuring how galaxies moved inside the Coma cluster, a dense grouping of about 1,000 galaxies, 320 million light-years from Earth. The numbers didn't fit. The galaxies were moving so fast that the cluster should have flown apart, but it hadn't. Zwicky proposed something the rest of astronomy ignored for 4 decades. He said there had to be enormous quantities of invisible mass holding the cluster together. He called it Dunkel Materie, dark matter. Everyone forgot about it until the 1970s. But Zwicky's real contribution wasn't dark matter. It was quieter and buried in the same work. The universe wasn't a smooth soup of galaxies. Galaxies came in clumps, and between the clumps, there was space. Empty space. Nobody knew how empty. In 1981, Kirshner and 3 colleagues were running one of the first large 3-dimensional galaxy surveys, mapping the positions of galaxies in a slice of the northern sky near the constellation Boötes. Their computer plot came back with a hole. Not a data error, a hole. A region where the galaxies simply weren't there. They ran the survey again. Same hole. They calibrated the instruments. Same hole. They published the paper, A Million Cubic Megaparsec Void in Boötes, in the Astrophysical Journal Letters, volume 248. It is 6 pages long, and it is one of the most quietly important papers in the history of cosmology. Because what Kirshner had found wasn't just an empty region, it was proof that the universe had structure, that matter clumped along threads. And between the threads were vast, quiet regions that behaved differently, aged differently. And if any of us ever traveled through them, would test the limits of what a human being can psychologically survive. Over the next 40 years, better surveys mapped the sky in greater detail, and the picture that emerged was strange. The universe is a web. Galaxies are strung along thin filaments of dark matter and gas, like water beading on a spider's thread. Where filaments intersect, superclusters form. And between the threads, cosmic voids, enormous, echoing vacuums that make up roughly 80% of the volume of the observable universe. That number is the one that changed how I look at the sky. 80% of the universe is essentially empty. The galaxies, the stars, everything you have ever seen in a Hubble photograph, that's the 20%. The rest is the void. And somehow, we happen to be in the 20%. We are one of the lucky ones, sitting inside a filament, surrounded by neighbors, born in a garden, which is easy to forget and important to remember. Because if we ever leave, we leave the garden. I want to make the Boötes void real to you, because the numbers alone don't do it. Numbers this large don't fit in a human brain. Imagine you're standing in the middle of a football field at night. In every direction, you can see stadium lights, thousands of them, close enough to feel. That's what living in the Milky Way is like. We are inside a galaxy, stars in every direction. The sky is full. Now imagine the field expands. The stadium walls rush outward at the speed of light for 100 million years. The lights get dimmer, then dimmer. Then you can't see them at all. You are still standing on the field, but the field is now so large that the walls are beyond your ability to perceive. That is what it would be like to stand inside the Boötes void. No stars visible in any direction. The nearest galaxy so distant that without a powerful telescope, it is invisible. The sky above your head is not the sparkling dome you know from Earth. It is black, truly, evenly, uniformly black. The kind of black your brain has never experienced, because on Earth, even the darkest sky has stars. If you were born in a void, you would grow up believing the universe was empty, because from where you stood, it would be. This is not hypothetical. There are galaxies inside cosmic voids. Astronomers call them void galaxies, and they are structurally different from ours. Lower star formation rates, fewer heavy elements, smaller, bluer, stranger, and critically, any intelligent life evolving in a void galaxy would look up and see almost nothing. Carl Sagan said we are made of star stuff, that the calcium in our bones was forged in supernovae, that the iron in our blood came from dying suns. He said it to make us feel connected to the cosmos. Civilizations in the deep voids would not have that connection. They would not see supernovae. They would not know that stars die and give birth to planets. They might not develop astronomy at all, because there would be nothing to look at. Their entire model of reality would be wrong, and they would have no way of knowing it. Now imagine you're a human traveling through such a place. You know what should be there. You've seen photographs of the Milky Way. You know the universe is full of light. But for the entire length of your journey, for tens of thousands of generations, if you made it that far, you would see none of it. You would be traveling through the negative space of creation. Here's where the story stops being about somewhere else and starts being about here. And I want to be careful with this section, because the idea I'm about to describe is real, published, and taken seriously by working cosmologists. But it is not the mainstream view. Most astronomers do not believe what I am about to tell you. A minority does. The evidence is contested. Keep that in mind. In 2013, 3 astronomers, Ryan Keenan, Amy Barger, and Lennox Cowie, published a paper in the Astrophysical Journal with a quietly disturbing title: Evidence for a 300 megaparsec scale, under density, in the local galaxy distribution. Academic language for something much simpler. We might already be inside a void. Not the Boötes void, a much larger, closer one. They named it after their initials, the KBC Void, roughly 2 billion light-years across. If confirmed, it would be the largest cosmic void ever detected. And our galaxy, the Milky Way, and everything you know, appears to sit somewhere inside it. If they're right, this touches something important. When we measure how fast the universe is expanding, we assume we're in an average place. That assumption is called the cosmological principle. Every measurement of the age of the universe, the rate of expansion, the fate of everything. Inside a void, the local expansion rate looks slightly different than it does inside a cluster. Some cosmologists, again, a minority, have argued that the KBC void might partly explain the Hubble tension, the unresolved disagreement between 2 ways of measuring cosmic expansion. Most physicists think the Hubble tension is more likely a signal of new physics, early dark energy, modified gravity, something we haven't seen yet. The KBC hypothesis is the outsider position, but it hasn't been ruled out. Papers are still being written on both sides. I bring this up not to convince you of the void hypothesis. I bring it up because of what it implies about our situation, even if it turns out to be wrong. There's a real chance that our tiny corner of the universe is not representative, that we are, in some cosmological sense, in an unusual place. Not the center of anything, but not the average either. And that possibility, held seriously, means our maps of everything beyond us may be subtly distorted by our position. If we ever leave, if humanity's descendants ever push past the Milky Way toward the next great structure, the distances they cross may be larger than the standard models predict, because they'd have to travel outward through emptiness before reaching the next filament. Our nearest neighbors may be further than we think, not because of physics, because of geography. We may be, in a sense we did not choose, born in the middle of nowhere. This is the part of the video that I think matters most, because everything I've said so far has been about the universe. What I want to talk about now is what the universe would do to a person. Suppose humanity solves the propulsion problem. Suppose we build ships that can sustain multi-generational travel. Suppose we send a small colony toward the Andromeda Galaxy, or toward the nearest large galaxy cluster outside the Milky Way. The journey will take, at minimum, tens of millions of years, and the ship will spend most of that time inside intergalactic space, the void between galaxies. Not the Boötes void, not the KBC, just the ordinary emptiness between galactic filaments, which is still, by any human standard, unimaginably vast. What would that be like? Humans have never experienced true sensory absence. Even prisoners in solitary confinement have walls, and sounds, and the passage of days. Even sailors in the middle of the Pacific have stars, and waves, and weather. The most isolated humans in history, Antarctic winterovers, submariners, astronauts on the International Space Station, still see other people, hear voices, and know that Earth is somewhere close. But a person born on a generation ship inside a void would experience something no human has ever experienced. They would look out the window every day of their life and see nothing. Not much. Nothing. A perfectly black frame with perhaps, if they were lucky, one or two smudges of distant galactic light so faint no human eye evolved on Earth could detect them without instruments. Their sky would be a lie told by machines. The stars they saw on their displays would be simulations, rendered to keep them sane. Some ships might not even show the real view outward, because researchers have already documented, in Antarctic winterover studies and in submarine crew data, that prolonged exposure to featureless environments produces a specific and predictable cluster of psychological effects. The condition is sometimes called the long eye. Antarctic researchers coined it in the 1960s. It's what happens when a human being stares into a featureless landscape for months on end. The visual cortex, deprived of edges, begins to generate its own. People report seeing figures at the edge of their vision, shapes that dissolve when looked at directly, faces in the snow, faces in the dark. There is a body of literature, Palankas and Sudfeld and others, cataloging the psychological effects of extreme isolation on polar researchers. Depression rates approach 60% by the end of a winter. Sleep architecture collapses. Some subjects report what researchers politely call unusual perceptual experiences, the medical term for hallucinations. These are people in Antarctica, on Earth, who know that sunrise is coming. Now imagine the same isolation, but the winter never ends, because there is no sun, there is no planet, there is no outside to return to. There are only the walls of the ship, the other 70 or 80 people you have known your entire life, and the black. And here is the crueler layer: time. A generation ship traveling through a void has to solve a problem no human institution has ever solved: cultural continuity across thousands of generations. Every religion humans have ever built has lasted at most a few thousand years. Every empire, at most a few centuries. Every language mutates beyond recognition within 20 generations. But this ship needs to keep working, keep repairing itself, keep steering, keep believing in the mission for potentially 100,000 generations. The people who arrive at the destination will not share a single word, gene, or memory with the people who launched. They will be a different species. They will look back at the founders the way you look back at Homo erectus. And they will have to trust that the founders, those distant, half-mythical ancestors from a place called Earth, which nobody alive has ever seen, pointed the ship at the right star. The founders will be legend, then myth, then story, then nothing. The ship will fall through the dark, guided by a promise nobody remembers making. Consider what this means for the children born mid-voyage. They will never touch grass, never feel weather, never see an animal that wasn't printed from a database or grown in a tank. The word sky will be an abstraction to them, like the word ocean is to someone who has only seen photographs. They will not be human in the way we are human, not because they've changed genetically. That might take longer than the trip, but because the entire referential vocabulary of human experience will have been amputated from their lives. They will invent new words for new experiences. They will forget the old ones. And here is the part I find hardest to sit with. They will not know they are missing anything, because from the inside, their world will be complete. They will have friends and rituals and stories and love. They will build meaning out of the material available to them, because that is what humans do in every environment we have ever entered. The ship is a coffin that thinks it's a cradle. But the people inside it will not know it is a coffin. They will just call it home, which is, in a way I can't fully articulate, the most human thing I can imagine. And also, the most sad. I want to break the essay for a moment, because I've been describing all of this as though it were a thought experiment, and I don't think that's honest. The reason I keep returning to voids, the reason I have read every paper I could find about the Boötes and the KBC and the ones we haven't named yet, is not because they are scientifically interesting, though they are. It is because when I first understood, really understood, that 80% of the universe is essentially nothing, I had a period of about 2 weeks where I could not look at the night sky without feeling something I did not have a word for. Not fear exactly, not awe. Something colder and more specific. The recognition that most of what exists does not include us. That the universe is, in its overwhelming majority, a place where we are not and where nothing like us has ever been. I got over it. Or at least, I got used to it. The way you get used to the fact that you will die or that everyone you love will die. It becomes a background hum instead of a foreground scream. But I think it changed how I look at things down here, at people, at the ordinary daylight world. Because if the universe is mostly empty and mostly indifferent and mostly not the kind of place where anything happens, then the fact that anything is happening here becomes almost unreasonable. A statistical accident so improbable that it verges on miraculous. That is not a scientific claim. It's just what I felt. And I'm telling you because I don't want to pretend I made this video from a place of clinical detachment. I didn't. I made it because I've been thinking about the void, off and on, for years, and I wanted to give it to you in the shape that I found it. Back to the essay. I want to try one more time to make the scale of this feel real. The Boötes void is 330 million light-years across. If you shrank the entire observable universe down to the size of Earth, the Boötes void would still be the size of a large country. If you shrank the universe down further to the size of a single room, the void would fit inside the room and contain, on average, 1 grain of sand. That is the density we are talking about. Not the density of matter, the density of galaxies, which are themselves made of hundreds of billions of stars, which are made of unimaginable quantities of matter. The universe has organized itself over 13.8 billion years into a structure where the overwhelming majority of it is nothing. There is a philosophical term for this. Physicists don't use it because physicists don't like philosophical terms, but there is one, and I think it applies. The term is achismism. It was coined in reference to Spinoza's philosophy and later developed by Hegel. The position that the finite world we perceive is a fleeting, almost illusory feature of a much larger reality that is essentially empty of it. For most of Western history, acosmism was an obscure philosophical position held by a small number of thinkers and considered charmingly strange. Then, in 1981, Robert Kirshner published 6 pages about a hole in the constellation Boötes, and it turned out the philosophers had been closer to the geometry of the actual universe than the astronomers. The universe is mostly not there, and here is where the horror sharpens. Because it is not just that the voids are empty, it is that they are getting emptier. The expansion of the universe pulls the filaments apart. In another 100 billion years, most of the galaxies visible to us today will have receded so far that their light no longer reaches us. Any civilization that survives that long will look up and see a smaller and smaller sky until eventually they see only their own galaxy. And beyond it, nothing. They will not know the rest of the universe was ever there. They will believe the Milky Way is everything. This is not speculation. In 2007, physicists Lawrence Krauss and Robert Scherrer published a paper in General Relativity and Gravitation called The Return of a Static Universe and the End of Cosmology. Their argument was straightforward. In the deep future, cosmology as a science becomes impossible. All the evidence that let us understand the Big Bang, the expansion, the age of the universe, all of it vanishes across the cosmic horizon. Any intelligent species that arises after that point will believe, correctly given their evidence, that they live in a static, eternal, single galaxy cosmos. They will be as wrong as it is possible for a thinking being to be, and they will have no way of knowing, which makes me wonder, what are we not seeing? What structures have already receded beyond our horizon that our ancestors could have observed if they'd been born earlier? What has the void already taken from us? I said at the beginning that once you understand what voids are, you cannot look at the night sky the same way. I want to close by telling you why. For most of human history, we looked up at the stars and assumed they were the story. That the sky with its constellations and planets and the pale wash of the Milky Way was what the universe was. It was full. It was rich. It was a place of characters and gods and destinies. But the stars are not the story. The stars are the exception. The story is the black between them. Every point of light you have ever seen is a rare, statistically improbable clump of matter in an otherwise empty cosmos. The universe is not a garden with occasional bare patches. The universe is a bare patch with occasional gardens. Most intelligent civilizations that ever exist, if they exist, will exist in the bare patches. They will look up at nothing. They will believe in nothing beyond themselves. They will be alone in a way we cannot fully imagine. We are the lucky ones, not because we are special, but because we happen to be inside one of the small, rare, glowing regions of the cosmic web. We were born in a garden, and we were told by our religions, our poetry, our early science, that the garden was the world. It isn't. The garden is the exception. The world is the black. But if we ever leave, if humanity's descendants ever push outward past the edge of the Milky Way, past the local group, past Laniakea, past everything we have ever named, they will not be traveling toward another garden. They will be traveling through the negative space, through the 80%, through the vast, patient, indifferent emptiness that is the actual universe. They will spend generations in the black. They will die and be born and die again, inside ships that fall through nothing. They will forget where they came from. They will forget what a star was. And by the time they arrive, if they arrive, they will not be human anymore in any way we would recognize. That is what long-distance travel actually is, not the science fiction, not the warp drives, not the aliens. A small light, moving slowly through a very large dark. One last thought. When you look up tonight, and I hope you will, try something. Don't look at the stars. Look at the space between them. Let your eyes rest on the dark, not the light. Because that dark is not empty background. That dark is the thing itself. That dark is what the universe is. The stars are the exception. You are the exception. Everything you have ever loved is the exception. And it is all suspended in a vastness that does not know we are here and would not care if we weren't. Somewhere in the constellation Boötes, right now, there's a region of space 330 million light-years across, and almost nothing lives inside it. Somewhere larger still, we might already be inside another. And beyond that, more voids, and more, stretching outward to the edge of what we can see, and, almost certainly, well beyond it. We are a candle in a cathedral the size of everything. The cathedral does not know we are burning, but we do. Burn brightly.